Hello, spiritual warriors, and welcome in to Temple of Becoming. And today we're going to be talking about what it takes to make the transformation from small, limited, blocked, wounded, old self to new, expansive, empowered, joyful, passionate, incredibly alive self with a lot more capacity to serve your purpose. So let's dive into this. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is V, and here at Temple of Becoming, which is my business, we exist to serve spiritual initiates who are going to the next level in their evolution. A lot of people can start out a very ambitious transformational process, which is what initiation is, but they quit as soon as it gets hard. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what it takes to really commit to going all the way and why it's so worthwhile. There's a certain amount of pain that we need to hit in ourselves, a lot of times it's a rock bottom in which we really are at a low point with a certain pattern or blockage in ourself, okay? When we hit up against this wall in ourselves, it could be anything. It could be a relationship blockage, okay? It could be professional blockage, something that was caused by trauma a long time ago, could have been caused by a story that we wove that we thought was going to protect us and keep us from ever getting hurt again, right? Because that's what trauma does. That's what a lot of people do to try to protect themselves from trauma, is create these stories that essentially wall us off from the fullness of life and the fullness of who we are in our spirit, okay? And that might help block us from getting hurt again. But it also can block us from fully living, fully experiencing, and fully creating to the capacity that we're here to create, serving to the capacity that we're here to serve, living with the ecstasy of purpose that we're here to live, that we fully can embody, okay? And it takes a couple things in order to be willing to break through these barriers, okay? These self-imposed or trauma-imposed barriers that can often happen without us even realizing we're doing it to ourselves, okay? It can happen in the subconscious mind, for sure. And the number one thing is pain, okay? Hitting up against the same wall in oneself over and over and over. If you've ever asked yourself, why do I keep doing this thing? Why do I keep falling in this pit? Why do I keep getting in the same situation? I keep dating the same person, okay? I keep, initiating this project that could really benefit me, make me money, and help other people, help my clients, help my company, help me get that promotion, whatever. But I just can't seem to get up and get motivated to follow through on this, right? I learned to code. I taught myself to code in 2021 as an example. And I watched a lot of people in the communities, the coding, self-taught coding communities I was moving through in 2021 fall off the bandwagon, because as soon as it got hard, as soon as it got challenging, and as soon as the negative emotions and the self-doubt comes up and the imposter syndrome comes up and the old stories come up, a lot of people would just quit, okay? And they would have a hard time getting back into the groove of self-study. They would have a hard time getting back into working on their coding project, their portfolio, whatever it was, okay? And it is really hard when we hit that moment, because at first we start with a bang with any intention, and then there's always like a point about a third of the way in where things get tough. And, this is just by law. This is the law of the universe. When we initiate an ambitious cycle of transformation, we're going to hit a point where it gets tough. It's just the law of the universe. It's just how creation works, okay? And when we're talking about a personal transformation in our process, something deep in us, okay, a blockage of some kind, we have to arrive, in order to really be motivated to change this and transform this all the way, we have to arrive at a certain amount of pain. And I went through this, several times, okay, with several different things in my healing journey. But the biggest one was relationships. I had a really hard time with creating healthy personal and professional relationships that could actually go to a deeper level of healthy connection, growth, sharing, interpersonal sharing, intimacy, okay, passion, friendship, commitment, vulnerability. I mean, all these things that make up the aspects of relationships, and there's different ways this plays out, whether it's a friend or a coworker or a family member or a client, right? Or an intimate partner. Being able to have things like healthy boundaries that allow us to have healthy relationships, right? Healthy communication, speaking our feelings and needs, and being able to share and open up and show who I was, okay? Because I was always in this story for years because of the relational trauma I went through, because I was abused. I was abused by people who were supposed to be safe adults as a child, okay? And I had this story that went really deep, actually deeper into my subconscious than I ever really knew until I started working with deep ritual magic and initiatory practices and ceremony and meditation, okay? And started realizing like, oh my God, I have this pattern. Like I have this pattern that I can't seem to break out of with relationships in particular, okay? I could figure out other areas of life, but this kept me stuck. And it got to the point where it was so painful that the pain was clearly behind me. It was in my past. It was in front of me. It was in my now. I was in a situationship again. And all I could see moving forward was that I didn't know how to break out of this, and I was just going to repeat this pattern forever unless I got some kind of solution for this. And that's when I hit basically a rock bottom with that particular pattern and asked for help from the universe. And I remember sitting down with one of my guides. Even before that, I sat down with one of my guides in meditation during an invocation, okay? And I was working with, the Clip-Off at the time, and I worked with the Clip-Off for a little over a year and a half, just around 2 years. And this particular guide said to me in my spirit inside, said to me with a very stern voice, V, like this, V, do you want this? And I literally just stopped because I knew what he was asking. He was asking me, am I ready to commit 100% to transforming, to feeling all of the feelings, the tender, vulnerable emotions, working through these traumas that were under the surface deeper than I had processed before, right? Because I'd been working with trauma processing, I'd been working with therapies, okay? But I was going to go deeper. Like, this is what he was asking me. It was either I commit or I should get out, because there was no middle ground in that point, okay? And I literally sat in meditation for like 5 whole minutes just breathing and asking myself that question and getting really clear that, like, was I really ready to do this? Was I really ready to say yes to this? Because I knew it would mean facing feelings, feeling feelings that I was always telling myself that were a weakness. Okay, for a long time, I had this strong belief that feelings were a weakness. Okay, this was my old paradigm, right? I thought feelings were weakness, feelings were silly and corny, emotions were a weakness, love wasn't real. I had told myself this, okay? I'd locked myself into this internal prison, okay, telling myself love wasn't real, that love couldn't be trusted, intimacy and vulnerability couldn't be trusted, that I didn't need relationships, I didn't need deep, especially deep, intimate relationships, that I had to stay on the surface, okay, that was the only safe place to be, that I was fine without other people in my life, that I had this concept of myself as like the person who was walled off, okay? Someone who was hard and walled off, and that was how I liked myself, and I didn't want to change. And this was me for a long time. And, if someone had asked me, how's that working for you, years ago, I would have said, it's working great. This is fine, I'm good. But after a while, okay, years go by, and there's still so much numbness in me. Years go by, and I still don't have a deeply bonded relationship with somebody, you know, on an intimate level. Years go by, and I keep getting into these really unhealthy dating relationships, all these different things that just kept happening. It was the Groundhog Day over and over and over. And that's what really got me, you know? And that's why I really sat with this, and I told myself, I'm either in or I'm out. Like, it's 100% or it's null, you know? And when in that moment of meditation, just breathing and getting really clear about, this is what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to let my old self die. I'm going to have to let my old, wounded, closed off self-concept, you know, of like, well, I'm just comfortable being a traumatized, wounded, closed off human being with walls around my heart. I never let anyone in. I literally had a jacket with spikes on it, like around the heart, right? I still have it, it's really cool, but I don't wear it in the same way, okay? Like, I had all these things that made up this self-concept of what I was comfortable with. But after a certain point of growth, I was no longer comfortable. In fact, I was in terrible pain, okay? It was exhausting, and I kept falling into the same patterns again and again, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And this is a blessing when this happens. And if you're going through this, or if you have been through this, or you recently went through this, congratulations, rejoice. Rejoice, because this is the first step to being able to transform and open up more space inside, okay, to hold more of our power, our light, our passion, our purpose, okay, our own energy, okay, to channel more of who we are. And it begins with this kind of pain, this kind of like, I'm so done. I cannot live like this anymore. Do not let me be the same. I cannot go one more day. Okay, if you're at this point, excellent. Because then we can really start breaking down the walls between us, our old concept, and our new self that we're going to be moving into, the new paradigm self. There's a journey that happens. There's a journey that happens from old self, okay, to new self. And in order to make that journey and fully embody that and fully integrate that, we have to go through a sort of death. A lot of people would call this a spiritual death. It could be called different names, okay, transformation, 100% transformation. It is something that makes room for the new. The old has to die in order for the new to come in. And anytime we have some kind of symbolic death like that, we are absolutely opening the door to a new way of living, a new life. Okay, and this is what I consciously chose that day, a couple years ago, when I sat in meditation and really had that heart-to-heart with my guide there, just really deeply internal, and said yes with a resounding yes to him, and said yes to myself with a resounding yes. And then I allowed, all I had to do from then was simply not give up and allow the things to unfold that would show me the walls inside me that I was ready to break down. And that's important. That's important for us to, that's why I say a lot of the times, you'll hear me say, allow your heart to break over and over when you start to really become conscious of the walls you've built inside to wall yourself off from life, from your own joy, your own passion, your own freedom, your own bliss, your own empowerment, your own personal power, your own energy, your own inner child's innocent, pure, unbridled expression of self, okay? And it's important and helpful to be around safe people when we are going through this process, that we are processing this with safe, healthy people who can hold that container. They don't have to be perfect people, but they, you know, should be people who are healthy enough, safe enough to have that level of attunement, healthy boundaries, healthy communication skills, right? To have that level of trust and safety to, you know, where we can, if we're going to be processing this with other people, this is very important. And it's important to vet well and choose these kind of people well and set boundaries with the people who aren't going to be fitting into that safe type of person to be around, especially during this type of transformative process. That's why a lot of people work with a counselor or a therapist or a trauma-informed coach, okay, some type of helping professional, who is aligned with where they're at. It feels like there's an alignment there, and there is some ground foundation of safety and trust. Okay, so I do recommend this. Personally, I have had the most growth working with my coach. She's a very established, very experienced trauma-informed coach who creates a very safe space for me, and I've worked with her for over a year. She's amazing. She's helped me completely transform specifically this old relationship pattern. Before I met her, I was doing a lot of deep work on a bunch of other stuff too. So I had already been doing self-therapy, right? I had been holding space for myself, and that's the other piece, okay? So I guess we're on number 3 here. Number 1 was pain. The willingness to change. The willingness to change completely and let an old self die in order to make a space for the new self to come alive. Number 2 is being around safe people, safe containers, creating safety for oneself. If we don't have these safe containers, whether that's physically or relationally, okay, especially for a lot of us who've been through relational trauma, okay? I've been through horrible relational trauma. I've met a lot of people who've been through relational trauma. It's very complex. It's important to be around safe people. That's number 2, is creating that safety, because if we can't do that, if we can't be in those kind of safe containers and relationships when we're doing this work, it becomes actually a distraction, okay? And how easy would it have been for me to go right back into an unhealthy relationship dynamic with somebody just to feel some kind of stimulation or rush from the push-pull type of dynamic? If anybody's been in this type of dynamic, you know what I'm talking about. It can actually create like a high because it's unpredictable. One minute the person's, warm and caring and loving and wants to be close. The minute they're pulling away and they're cold shoulder and you don't know what happened and they're pushing you away, and it's like this push-pull type of limerent high, okay? And I can talk more about that if it's helpful for you. Let me know in the comments if that's something you've worked with, you've worked through, you've experienced this type of draw to an unhealthy dynamic. And I've worked through this quite a bit myself. So that's the second thing, is healthy containers. Number 3 is having a healthy container inside for ourselves, okay? Having a healthy relationship with ourselves. And I talk a lot about this concept of, if we cannot sit with the darkest, most wounded parts of ourselves, the most vulnerable parts of ourselves, our inner child parts, our scarred parts, the parts that have been holding on to the trauma burdens, the parts that are angry, sad, sad without understanding why they have just these burdens, right? Whatever it may be. If we can't sit with those and hold loving, unconditional presence with those to allow them from a very capital S self-centered place, okay, to allow them to release those burdens and to accept them as they are, accept them unconditionally, without needing them to change, without needing them to be anything other than what they are, and saying thank you for what you've done for me internally over the years, holding on to these things that couldn't be processed before. Thank you. Thank you. You may have been misunderstood, but help me understand. Help me understand where you're coming from. And having that inner intimacy, that inner safe container. Everything starts at home. Everything starts with us internally, and it ripples out, okay? It ripples out. If we can't sit with those parts of ourselves that are the most dark, the most wounded, the most burdened, the most vulnerable, the most in pain, how can we ever sit with an external person and hold that type of presence for them and truly effectively help them through just accepting them as they are? Okay, spiritual warriors, I hope this video was helpful in understanding how to go from small, limited, shelled off self to new, expansive, empowered, liberated self, okay? And if you relate to this feeling of having this calling within you, this spiritual message, this call to service, a call to a purpose, okay, even if you don't know what that purpose is yet, that's waking up and welling up in you. But everywhere you turn, there just seems to be internal blockages, barriers. Every invitation to check out, disassociate, doom scroll, and self-abandon just seems to be way too easy to accept, right? That little triangle on your phone that you do, that's what I'm talking about. All these little ways that we are invited to check out and use our energy in ways that don't help that channel to open. If this is you, this is something you're struggling with and you're ready to break free, I hope you will join me in one of my upcoming events. Okay, I have two. March 1st, I'm offering a live in-person event in Portland, Oregon. Okay, that's March 1st, 2026. And then on March 8th, I'm offering the live online event on Zoom. I hope you'll join me for one or both of these upcoming free events in which I'm going to be sharing a simple technique for breaking free and opening up the channel to manifesting your purpose into your reality with ecstatic joy.